Hi everyone, I'm Jeff Copeland, and I'd like to welcome you back to Jeff's Nonsport Card Universe, where we look at the history, evolution, and just plain fun of collecting non-sport cards. Today we're going to look at one of my favorite sets of all times, also a set that is considered a foundational set for those who collect the early non-sport issues. I'm talking about the 1910 Hassan, the world's greatest explorers set. A set of 25 cards that are absolutely beautiful, breathtaking in terms of design. Now, before we get to the cards, let's talk just a little bit about the era in which the cards were issued so that we'll know a little bit why these were incredibly popular with adults and kids alike when they came out. The cards came in boxes that looked like this in Hassan cigarettes, and people were ready for them because in 1910, there was still so much of the world that was unexplored or uncharted. Africa, South America, the North Pole, the South Pole, many regions of the world were still very mysterious to a lot of people. At that time, explorers were considered the true rock stars of the world, and the exploits of these explorers were published in newspapers and magazines worldwide. Adults and kids both couldn't wait to get the next account of somebody discovering an amazing thing about the world. Now, at that time, continents were so isolated because of the travel and the travel restrictions of the time. Remember, in 1910, this was only 7 years after the Wright brothers' experiment at Kitty Hawk. Air travel was still in the experimental phase. As a matter of fact, this same year, another set of cards came out by Hassan called T218 Series of Champion Athletes. In that set, which had everything from hammer throwers to distance runners to swimmers, they had, get this, 4 aviators who were considered athletes. Check out the plane on this one. Look at the steering wheel on the airplane on this one. And then look at the outfits, the flying costumes on these individuals here. Now, sadly, on the backs of these cards, it says that 3 of the 4 died in plane crashes about a year before. That's how dangerous air flight was. Transportation between continents was typically done by ship, but those were long and dangerous voyages as well. Remember, this card set came out a year before Titanic's terrible maiden voyage. So the world is still very isolated. New discoveries are happening all the time. Hassan took advantage of this and came out with a card set that extolled the wonderful adventures of the pioneers and the explorers of the time. Now I want to share with you a couple of my favorite cards from the set so you'll get a good idea of what these were like. Here's the first one. This is the Duke of Abruzzi. He was the first man to climb most of the major mountains of the world. He was also a prolific writer who wrote for magazines and newspapers, and kids and adults couldn't wait for his next exploits to show up. This is Roald Amundsen. He actually discovered the magnetic North Pole, the true magnetic North Pole, that changed navigation for transportation up to the very present. He also was a prolific speaker and traveled the globe to talk about his exploits to packed houses. This is S.E. Andre, who decided that he was going to explore the world by balloon. The only problem was, on one of his adventures up by the North Pole, he and 2 other explorers in a balloon disappeared and were never heard from again. And kids at that time read about all this on the backs of the cards, so they knew just how dangerous it was to do this type of exploration. This is C.E. Borchgrevink. He held the record at that time for getting the farthest toward the South Pole, and he wrote letters back to newspapers explaining what he was seeing along the way, and people couldn't wait for the next installments. This is George DeLong. He was an Arctic explorer. Sadly, as it says on the back of his card, one year he and his entire crew and their ship got stuck in the ice. They all perished, and their bodies weren't found till 3 or 4 years later. So we're talking about some really dangerous adventures here, and people loved reading about them. This is Matthew Henson. He is a particular note in this set and one of the more popular cards in the set because he was the first African American to go to the North Pole with Peary. He is also recognized almost every Black History Month still to this day because of his pioneering work. This is Anthony Fiala. Fiala is important because not only did he travel the entire world and do some exploring, he took his camera with him. He sent back some of the very first pictures that people in other parts of the world saw of remote parts of South America, of Africa, and of the poles as well. He was everywhere, and his pictures were highly prized at the time. Now I'm going to show you two at once. This is Stanley and Livingstone, the two explorers that really shed some light on what deepest, darkest Africa was like at the time. I'm sure you've heard the old quote, Dr. Livingstone, I presume. Well, these are the two individuals that helped us understand the Dark Continent. Then one of my favorite cards in the set, and actually the most popular in the set, Miss Annie Peck. She was the world's greatest mountain climber at the time, was a hero to young girls in particular. Think of her as sort of a combination of Serena Williams, Lindsey Vonn, and Ronda Rousey. She was a true rock star of the day, incredibly popular, and a very gifted speaker as well. Now, the rest of the cards in the set, they're equally as beautiful, incredibly colorful, just absolutely delightful cards, but only 25. Now that leads into some of the basics about the set. There are 25 cards in the set, unnumbered. So you have to use a modern checklist in order to make sure you have the entire set. There are no known rarities in the set, but some of the cards are more popular than others. Miss Annie Peck, of course, Livingstone, of course, Stanley, of course, Matthew Henson, of course. A typical non-graded card will cost between $5 and $7 today. Now think about that. The sports cards of that era are incredibly expensive. This is a wonderful way to begin collecting the older cards and getting the history that goes along with them as well. A complete set today will cost about $200 to $250, depending on the condition. It can go a little higher than that, but the cards are hard to find in really wonderful condition. Nobody's actually sure why, but this particular set was prone to cracking, especially around the edges. Not just regular wear, but something in the printing process and the paper that was used. So really nice examples are highly prized. Also, in terms of difficulty, I would rate this set about medium. It's not incredibly tough, but again, because of condition and locating some of the more popular cards like Annie Peck and Livingstone, it's very difficult to do. This is one of the foundational sets. The era of 1910 was a hotbed of cards in the non-sport arena, and we'll be talking about many of these as we go along. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed our look at the 1910 Hassan, the world's greatest explorers cards. It's a great set. So for now, enjoy your cards, enjoy the thrill of the chase, just enjoy your collecting with your cards. Thank you, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and one more thing. Go to therapper.com if you get a chance, so you can see the premier non-sport card collecting magazine, and at the site, you can order a free issue. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.